Valve just dropped a brand new CS2 update. Going right into the patch notes, they say certain types of movement, shooting, input automations such as hardware-assisted counter-strafing will now be detected on Valve official servers, resulting in a kick from the match. Input binds that include more than one of the following commands will now be ignored by default, which can be re-enabled just by using the cheat protected command. Plus, the jump throw confirmation grunt can now be heard by other players nearby. Another interesting part of this update though is they actually confirm that VACNet in its initial testing for 3.0 has begun on a limited set of matches. Continuing on, that if you believe your match was incorrectly cancelled, to go ahead and send them an email. Without a doubt, a pretty big and important update to the game. Obviously, it doesn't come with some huge content, but this is pretty important for the underlying anti-cheat. The fact that they are now straight up just detecting any automated hardware, which means that anybody who bought those Razer keyboards are pretty much going to be out of luck now, at least on Valve official servers. The disconnect message you will see is for input automation or kicked for input automation. It doesn't seem like players will directly get banned for this, but more so just get kicked out of the game. Although this update didn't come directly with brand new content, in the files they have added some new strings for Danger Zone. A few months ago, back in June, we obviously got that little teaser from Valve where they changed the localization of Danger Zone, so could it potentially be close now? We've waited a few months after they have initially teased it, so will this be the next update? They went on to explain their decision in this blog post, saying Counter-Strike is constantly evolving from art to maps to inventive plays, and even player input. The CS community shapes the game. Scripting and automating player commands has always been contentious. Developing one's coordination and reaction time has always been key to mastering Counter-Strike. Recently, some hardware features have blurred the line between manual input and automation. So we've decided to draw a clear line on what is or isn't acceptable in Counter-Strike. We are no longer going to allow automation that circumvents these core skills, and moving forward, players suspected of automating multiple player actions from a single game input may be kicked from their match. I have seen the error code for the input automation, but yet for what the new improvements to VAC are right now. Valve was tackling and patching exploits for the past few weeks. We also saw the mini ban wave that took place at the start of August, which tracked over 500 game bans, and then it also saw an increase from the normal, which was just less than 100 when you actually compare from, let's say, June all the way through now in August, where it definitely looks like Valve has started something for their anti-cheat throughout the past month. They announced VACNet over 6 years ago, so now that we're on the third variation of it, let's see how good their AI is trained to be. Was this finally the anti-cheat update players have been asking for since CS2 released? The thing that I find pretty interesting is obviously we've seen a bunch of different anti-cheat improvements throughout the past months, but Valve is confident with this update that they are putting it inside of their patch notes, saying that now the testing is starting. If you went out and got a snaptap keyboard after all the recent hype, well, you might have to try and look into getting a refund. Since it has been a few months since Valve officially announced the return of Overwatch for CS2, they must have gotten a bunch of data for the VACNet 3.0, as that is originally how the first system worked, as it did get trained from Overwatch cases, so this must mean that their Overwatch system has been working pretty well, which if you have been catching up on our videos for the past months, we have seen a lot of cheaters get manually banned directly from Overwatch, even though it is seen as sort of a myth existing, seeing as no players quote unquote have it publicly. Many cheaters have shared that they were manually banned. So now that Valve has announced their third version, hopefully things continue in the right direction. I think seeing as they have now just announced 3.0, it's good to go back to when they talked about the first version. Feel free to listen to John McDonald, one of the lead Valve devs who are actually approaching the Valve anti-cheat.
The elevator pitch for VACNet was born. And the idea was that basically we would use this Overwatch as a giant pool of labeled data, and we would train VACNet from Overwatch. And then we would build a cluster of machines that would monitor matches with the model that we built. We would use VACNet then to submit cases, and then humans would ultimately decide whether or not the person was a cheater. So back to our sort of Overwatch pipeline, all we have to do is slot in VACNet kind of right here. Okay, so how did we do? Man, I hope my graphs work over here. Oh boy. Okay, good. I have a later graph that I see is totally good, so we're just going to skip ahead. Great. So, oh yeah, hey, here's the period. I'm sorry, I know I said I wouldn't move. Here is the period where we had increased participation right here. And you see, this conviction rate just doesn't move at all. It was just horrifying. And again, throughout here, like our participation fell, and it just didn't impact the conviction rate at all. Sorry. All right. Okay, so we deployed VACNet. We deployed VACNet in early 2017. And during this time, participation sort of doesn't really change. Like it maybe is going up a little bit if you squint at it, but most likely what's happened is it's sort of just asymptoted down to the level of participation that we expect. It looks a whole lot like sort of any game launch ever that has sales, right? So here we deployed VACNet, and you can see, hey, we started getting more convictions. That's great. And we deployed a really simple model. We didn't quite have enough data yet, but we were like, hey, this thing's doing pretty good. And the conviction rate overall for VACNet started to go up. And then a little bit later, we had the opportunity to sort of train with more data until finally in December, early December, we hit the crossover point where now like we actually get more convictions than non-convictions in Overwatch. So yay, the system works great. So how great does it work? So human-submitted cases, when a human submits a case to Overwatch, the likelihood that they get a conviction is only 15 to 30%. And that sort of varies on a bunch of factors, like the factors might include the time of day of the week, the time of the year, is the game on sale, is it spring break? There's a bunch of things. But the point is that human convictions are very low. And VACNet convictions are very high. Like VACNet gets a conviction when it submits a case, it convicts 80 to 95% of the time. And it varies pretty much on the same factors with one exception. And that one exception is that whenever we retrain VACNet, its conviction rate is like nearly 100% for a little while until cheaters adapt and start to react to it. All right, so hopefully I've convinced you this is kind of a cool thing and it works pretty well and I'm good at Excel. We can talk about how we train a learner. And we're only going to spend one slide on this because I really just wanted here to give you a pointer to Keras, which is like if you're new to deep learning, Keras is great. But the sort of main sort of thrust of training a learner is that you need lots of X and Y data. And at least for supervised learning, which is the thing that we've been sort of talking about here, you need lots of XY data, you need to fit it, and then sort of you just repeatedly ask, hey, how are you doing? Hey, how are you doing? You have some measures that you pay attention to, and you're like, how are you doing? Are you doing good? Are you doing better? Great. And then when it stops getting better, you're like, okay, hold the phone. I've got my meat grinder. And then, like I said, you want to take a look at.
So it seems like the current version of CS2 and Valve's trusted partners are doing a pretty good job now that they are willing to release VACNet 3.0.